Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me during this presentation, which will be addressing the ongoing evolution of the open source platform initiatives within the PurpleWRT Foundation, and specifically those projects that are tied and aligned with the Product Steering Committee. This specific topic on the open source platform evolution aligns very well with the roles of the Product Steering Committee. Focus in on defining the requirements from a business and product perspective that drive the evolution of a carrier-grade open source development effort. The open source platform evolution is tied very closely to the telecommunications industry, which has evolved from an analog to a digital platform, and it changes the way we live, we work, socialize, and play. And the open source platform evolution and the development of the business and product requirements is a focal point of the Purple Foundation Product Steering Committee. So from a product requirement standpoint, we can look at how broadband has become essential to our daily lives. You know, just like power and water are essential to our daily existence, it's now become imperative where we have high-speed internet connectivity, fast response times, low latency, very high quality broadband connections. And it's an expectation versus a wish list. Got to have these things. But if you think about it, we think about also other things in the home, all these devices. So it's about an increasing number of connected components in the home, connected devices, smartphones, tablets, digital assistants, smart speakers, entertainment platforms in general, gaming, and the list goes on. And so from a service and software application perspective, we're challenged with how we work from home, all those different parameters associated with working from home, the use of our broadband connections, which invoke some thoughts of how we securing the data that which we move back and forth across the internet in and out of the home. Ultimately, we have a situation where we have multiple family members, for example, that are using a common device. How do we know exactly what's happening? And is there an impact when we have one family member that's using a device for one specific purpose, but another one that comes in and may decide they need to use it for banking or some business-related transactions? Got a lot of issues with regards to making sure that the platform evolution is solid and secure. And it leads us to the need to make sure that we can embrace new services that align with our expectations for securing the information, data, and integrity of our daily lives. So as we consider new services and expectations, those drive the product initiatives from both a consumer and a business perspective. Now let's talk about that for a little bit. You know, if we think about it, there's this new trend, and the new trend is more of this at-home experience, the gaming, being able to contribute to other types of entertainment in the home, video on demand, over-the-top video, linear TV, whatever it may be. It's the trend by which the family is staying at home more. We could talk a little bit about that in a moment when we consider what's happening in the world today. But then we also have to think about other objectives within the use of broadband. Let's talk about then living in place. So we have situations in today's world where more and more adults are spending their lives at home rather than going to care facilities or being able to move to locations by which they may have the need to have a broader experience with their connected lifestyle. So clearly there's a need to be able to provide in the existing location by which someone lives and may live for a very long period of time, the foundation by which broadband can provide that better experience. And then if we think about it as we shift towards the business aspect, let's talk about working from home. And again, alluding to the fact where we are today, based on the need to be able to shift our workplace from some remote location where we used to have to travel every day to a location in the home. How do we provide that level of connectivity for what needs to be done from a business perspective, tie that into our personal lifestyles? It becomes a significant issue. Then we start talking about the things such as managing security, parental controls, which we have to leverage into our home life, but how does that then affect the business community? Do they conflict with each other? How do we then promote an evolution of a platform that supports the home and the business needs? Clearly, there's evolving services that are critical to the future capabilities on which an operating system platform is built. And those routers and gateways, the devices that provide that connectivity, they're also evolving. In fact, innovation has challenged the old model. So as we reflect on the fact there's an evolution needed in the platform is both software, firmware, hardware. What does that mean from an evolution perspective? So there's been a number of existing and next generation chips that have allowed capabilities far beyond what the traditional modems and routers have previously been able to provide. They include things such as hardware offload for virus protection, integrated security features that provide that better connection between the home and the business. So the next generation of chipsets are finding their way into this newest generation of home and business router equipment. The router is becoming a platform for value-added services and features that meet the different needs of how the devices within the home or within the business or business and home segments are used. And as a result, the industry must evolve. And they evolve faster, time to market, and how we get there as an industry is a focal point of the Purple Foundation, and specifically the Product Steering Committee. What does it mean in terms of developing those requirements that combine both the physical and the soft components of the different technologies that are being deployed by service providers throughout the world? Historically, operators have worked with OEMs and ODMs, original equipment manufacturers and device manufacturers, to build very customized routers. And in the past, most of those have been wired connections. So there's also an evolution now whereby the router has become a wireless component. So as the communication in the mobility world expands in terms of the complexity and capabilities of those connections, we're seeing more and more of a transition of the wired to the wireless domain. So if we think about this, over the years, there's been numerous generations of these routers, and they focus primarily supporting better, faster speeds and Wi-Fi. And it's important, but it's also important when we think about the open source evolution, which is clearly the key to the future of broadband connected home services. And this is where Purple fills the gap to leading an effort on platform standardization as well. In 2015, Purple evolved as an organization to focus on software and an open source initiative, which was to unlock the potential of emerging technologies. So the challenge taken by the Purple Foundation is to drive this path forward with service providers, chip vendors, and equipment manufacturers, systems integrators, and the importance of making sure we involve the software developers, whether they're working in an operator environment or they're third-party developers. They are key to the future. So the adoption of open source platform standardization is an imperative to drive innovation faster and with value adds in terms of what we can do from a software perspective. So in a way, if we think about this and all of the discussion around the physical layer, the firmware, software layer, Purple becomes the way forward for platform evolution. The value proposition for Purple and the role of the Product Steering Committee fits into several categories, including the broadband delivery network, the platform architecture, gateway technology, and the implementation of standards that are incorporated in the platform development effort itself. Starting with the broadband delivery network, what we view as two very distinct methods by which data and internet connectivity is provided between the customer gateway, and the core network elements. The traditional copper fiber cable has given way to the emerging mobile distribution methodology, 5G ultra wideband, where we can start looking at things related to the reductions in latency, improvements in reliability, throughput, becoming more critical, having the ability of actually serving multiple types of applications through both wired and wireless without any significant degradation in the quality of what's expected from a service perspective. As we drop through the circle, what we're going to start looking at are the very specific items that the Purple Foundation and the Product Steering Committee and the entire product organization from the Purple standpoint is actually incorporating into development efforts. The first of which is the high-level API. The high-level API provides a way by which services which are distributed directly through the operator and or a third party in terms of an application can be managed directly using a lifecycle management process. And with regards to the way the infrastructure or actually architecture is set up, the architecture from a service standpoint, from an application implementation, is based on containerization. The ability of the service provider or a third party to install or provide a piece of software or components of software that would be installed on and directly on residential and or other types of gateways to be able to service an entire location without having to install specific software in every single device in that particular area, whether it be a consumer's household, or within a business domain. An example of that would be virus protection. Well, today, many virus protection softwares are installed directly on PCs, on smart devices, the list goes on. In this particular scenario, the virus protection could be written in such a way where all of the detection of viruses is maintained and processed in one location, and that would be the residential or commercial business gateway. As we step through the other element, or one of the other elements in the foundation playbook, it has to do with mobility services. And those mobility services are tied clearly to the emergence of Wi-Fi. The capabilities of Wi-Fi have improved. They've expanded significantly in the past 2 to 3 years. And now we're looking at adding yet another band of frequencies to the capabilities of Wi-Fi to even provide better experiences in terms of throughput, reliability, and reduction in latency. That particular effort is being hosted by the Purple Mesh effort within the foundation. That Purple Mesh effort had been defined in terms of product requirements that were established to ensure leveraging access points, leveraging gateways and other technology within the customer's premises to provide that better experience in terms of utilizing one or more bands, band steering, anything that would help provide a way by which there would be a seamless experience for the customer on the device they're using. Purple Mesh is based on the Easy Mesh design. Purple Mesh is a hardened version or operator-centric version that includes all the safety features that are needed in order to ensure a protected experience for the customer and also manageability by the operator. As we step through, we also talk about other initiatives specific to the routers and the chipsets. The low-level API. The low-level API being the binding agent that allows the chipsets to interconnect and connect with the applications that sit above that are containerized. So a more efficient way in which the silicon providers, chip providers, can provide and provision a unified method by which software and by which communications takes place clearly without obstruction between the lowest layer in the hardware abstraction and the high level in terms of the application management and services. An example here is hardware offload, where it could be, getting back to the discussion on viruses and security, where the chip vendors provide a way for quickly evaluating a linear stream of data to determine whether or not the virus, or if there potentially is a virus that's intruding into the gateway, and providing a way by which the gateway itself, through the higher level application, can block those viruses from traversing through the remainder of the network. And then let's talk about how all of this components, or all these components, fit together. And that's based on the open source development itself. PurpleWRT is another project that's under the direction of the product working groups. And that particular application is really the framework on which the entire operating system is built. PurpleWRT is based on an open gateway initiative, and that initiative is well underway. And currently version 1.0 of PurpleWRT has been published, with upcoming versions that will be occurring on a quarterly basis beginning in the year 2021. And what drives all of the capabilities of the items we just talked through are the use of standards, broadband forum standards, other standards that are tied tightly to all of the different initiatives within the Purple Foundation and the product working groups, and specifically the steering committee. So the question is how do we get there? You know, together we can utilize open source for software development, which is a significant portion of the code that's in most residential gateways. But the goal is not to marginalize the value out of the ecosystem. We got to work together. Chip vendors, integrators, ODMs, OEMs, as a team in order to make this happen. So for these areas where real innovation is occurring, we can standardize APIs and technologies, like the discussion we've had on containers, to enable innovation, and that allows a simpler or more seamless way to integrate. So Purple is following a blueprint that was based on what's been done today in the cloud computing world, and they've done it successfully, and applying it to the residential gateways and leveraging standards to get there. Many of us who are members of the Purple Foundation have been working with standards and standards groups in the past for a very long time. And we talked about this, the Broadband Forum, which has helped us standardize on things such as remote manageability, and the up and coming efforts in order to tie applications which are provided by third parties and being able to manage those as well. Other examples are that there's the Wi-Fi Alliance, and we've standardized on Wi-Fi home networking, and part of the foundation, again, Purple Mesh being an initiative that's driving forward based on Wi-Fi Alliance standards. But the challenge has been bringing it all together, and this is where the Purple Foundation is very interesting. And the work that's being done in the product steering committee to define the requirements from a product perspective in order for the technical teams to develop what needs to be done to make Purple a success. And it takes great open source projects like OpenWRT, which is what PurpleWRT is based on. And it brings together the open standards like EasyMesh from the Wi-Fi Alliance, 6TR69, and all those other topics and other items that are very specific to standards and the implementation of standards. And where that brings us now is a way in which we need to pull together as service providers, the equipment manufacturers, chip vendors, the integrators, the developers, to make up this list of companies that are part of the Purple membership. The Purple has long-term vision focused on innovation and industry scale. And the vision that is focused on evolving a more intelligent and personalized home network. Again, how we look at third-party applications and the way in which we interact, and the way in which businesses can also take advantage of a common platform for their router and service technology within their locations. And we hope you'll join us. There are 35 member companies to date, and if you search out and look for purplefoundation.org, that's PRPL foundation.org, you can actually find more details. Thank you so much. I appreciate your attendance, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in future Purple meetings. Where PurpleWRT steps in, it allows then the operators and the community of developers to build the components necessary, so whereby an operator then can manage the experience in the case where there's a deployment of new hardware or existing hardware. OpenWRT doesn't really provide that framework to be able to provide the communications linkage between the router device and the control platform in the background to make sure that the device is operating correctly, to make sure the connections are good, et cetera. So using broadband forum standards, for example, the ability to then manage the device remotely, as well as we talked about a little while ago, these new efforts to be able to provide portability of applications in terms of containers directly onto the router itself is something that is not directly connected to the OpenWRT effort, but is definitely a focus of PurpleWRT and some of the emerging standards coming out of the forum based on USP and TR369, which provide device type of management with the software components that are integrated, as well as other capabilities. So for the most part, that's the long-winded answer to say the ability of remotely managing the device from a service provider perspective.
No, it's good. Thank you. So that was actually a question from the audience. My question is, so just for clarity with everyone listening, you talked about working groups and, what's the difference between a working group, for example, and the product committee?
Oh, sure. So the way the structure is set up within the foundation is the product steering committee works with requirements and through all of the different contributions that come in through the member companies plus others, since we have that agreement or a high level discussion point with all the open standards communities. The thinking is that the product steering committee then would collect requirements and determine, do we need to establish a working group to then start fleshing out the details. So there's the concept phase that comes to the product steering committee in terms of these very high level concepts. Then a product working group is established to define all the product requirements. And those product requirements are generated by multiple members who have elected to be part of these working groups. Once the working group is completed with their particular project, then they move that back into the steering committee. The steering committee then talks about evaluating the value proposition. Is this something that the foundation wants to move forward with? And then addresses those needs with the technical steering committee in the case where it's decided to move forward on a particular product development effort. So the transition would be, here's a high level definition of a particular type of service that we want to build into the foundation. Next step is defining the working group who will flesh out the requirements. And then finally taking the approval of that particular working group effort from the product perspective, and then handing it off to the technical steering committee that will then establish their own working groups that will create the technical requirements that would be used to develop the applications and or open source material themselves. And I'm sure there's going to be some other discussion coming up specifically from David's conversation on the TSC related work.
Okay, so it's more top down. Product committee's first step, establishing the working group next step, and then there are multiple smaller working groups within that to actually make the requirements and standardize and build.
Yes, that's a good summary.
Okay. Oh no, it was good. I actually didn't know, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Um, and then I think we have time for one more question. How does Purple related to other industry initiatives such as RDK?
That's an interesting question. So RDK is an open source initiative, which is really tied very closely to the cable industry. Where in terms of open WRT and Purple WRT are tied very closely to the service provider industry from a telco perspective. What we're seeing though is that there's this energy being put into the highest level of both of the initiatives, the high level API, for example, lifecycle management. So we're seeing more of this convergence between the two open source initiatives. Nothing is fully formed yet, but the discussions are taking place, and whereby if we combine our energies together, we'll be able to service this broader set of application developers who will be able to leverage whatever platform is necessary to be able to service the customer. So it becomes an interesting initiative, and with very little conflict in terms of how we need to move forward independently of each other.
Oh, that's great. We have time for one more question. So in 2 minutes, this is another one for myself. Can you please say more about who participates in your committee?
That's a good question. So for the product steering committee, really is driven quite a bit by product requirements, which comes from the service providers directly. However, what we're finding though is the necessity to make sure we're involving all of the members of the foundation who have a specific interest in making sure that we collectively come up with the path forward needed for developing this robust solution. The systems integrators, for example, have been working in this area of integration of software onto hardware platforms for very long periods of time. They have quite a bit of knowledge in what works and what doesn't work, bringing the integrators, the chip vendors who can tell us and define and help us understand the capabilities of the chipsets, plus the developers who actually have to go through and take these product requirements and then ultimately build the final product. So it truly is a volunteer initiative. And from a PSC perspective, the focus would be primarily on defining and getting the involvement of those resources within the foundation who have the skill set and knowledge to be able to help define the product requirements for the industry.